The Boeing 777 shuddered through turbulence somewhere over the Pacific, its cabin lights dimmed for the red-eye flight from Seoul to San Francisco. In row 13, Captain Vera Nighthawk Castellanos had her military-issued baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, trying to catch sleep between the crying infant in 12A and the businessman's aggressive keyboard clicking in 14C. She'd been traveling for 36 hours straight. A whirlwind of congressional hearings, Pentagon briefings, and media interviews that had left her drained and questioning every decision that led her to this moment. The static crackled through the cabin speakers like electricity through wet copper wire. Captain Martinez's voice, strained and unfamiliar, cut through the white noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some technical difficulties with our navigation systems. I need to confirm we have Captain Castellanos on board. If you're listening, please identify yourself to the flight crew immediately." Vera's eyes snapped open. The couple across the aisle exchanged nervous glances. The businessman stopped typing. In the sudden quiet, she could hear her own heartbeat drumming against her ribs. 3 months of forced administrative leave, 3 months of investigations and depositions, and now this. Her fingers instinctively moved to the small silver wings pinned inside her jacket pocket. The ones her father had given her the day she earned them. The ones that had carried her through 12 years of flying missions that officially never happened. "Ma'am," the flight attendant appeared beside her seat, voice barely above a whisper. "Are you Captain Castellanos?" Vera straightened, her training overriding the exhaustion. Around her, passengers were beginning to murmur, phones emerging from pockets as people sensed something beyond routine mechanical failure. Through the small oval window, she could see stars scattered across an ink-black canvas, no city lights below to indicate their position. The plane's slight banking motion felt wrong, too sharp, too frequent. "Yes," she said, standing and following the attendant toward the cockpit. As they moved through the cabin, she noticed details her civilian mindset had missed. The way the aircraft's engines hummed with subtle irregularities, how the overhead bins vibrated just slightly out of rhythm. Her pilot's instincts, dormant for months, began awakening like muscles remembering old routines. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Martinez turned toward her with eyes that held equal parts relief and desperation. Behind him, the instrument panels blinked with warning lights she recognized, but had hoped never to see on a commercial aircraft. The radio chattered with urgent voices speaking in rapid Korean and English, fragments of coordinates, and weather reports painting a picture of something far more complex than mechanical failure. "Thank God you're here," Martinez breathed, his hands trembling slightly on the controls. "We need you to take a look at this." The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly below them, and somewhere in that vast darkness, Vera realized, lay answers to questions no one had yet thought to ask. Her administrative leave was about to become the least of her concerns. The woman who had been drowsing in row 13 was gone, replaced by the pilot who had earned her call sign in the skis over places that didn't exist on any map. Through the static, she heard her own voice respond with the calm precision that had kept her alive through missions she couldn't discuss. "Show me what we're dealing with." Captain Martinez gestured toward the radar display, where 3 unidentified aircraft moved in precise formation, closing on their position from the northwest. The transponder codes were unlike anything in civilian aviation databases, and their approach vector suggested capabilities that belonged to a different kind of sky entirely. Vera studied the screen, her mind automatically calculating intercept courses and evasive maneuvers, while her heart recognized the signature of aircraft that officially didn't exist. "How long have they been tracking us?" she asked, slipping into the co-pilot's seat with the fluid motion of someone returning home after a long absence. 17 minutes. They appeared right after we passed the NOPAC waypoint." Martinez's voice carried the barely controlled panic of a commercial pilot facing a situation no training manual had prepared him for. "Vera, what the hell is happening up here?" The radio crackled again, and this time the voice spoke with the crisp authority she remembered from briefing rooms in Nevada and Virginia. "United 847, this is Spectre Lead. You are ordered to maintain current heading and altitude. Do not deviate from prescribed flight path. Acknowledge immediately. Vera felt the familiar chill that came with recognition. Spectre flights were black operations, off-books missions that left no paper trail and acknowledged no rules of engagement beyond mission completion. She'd flown alongside them twice, both times in situations that had required surgical precision and absolute deniability. The aircraft on their radar weren't there to escort a commercial airliner safely to its destination. United 847, acknowledge transmission, the voice repeated, patience wearing thin. Martinez looked at her with desperate hope. You know these people. She did, but knowing them and trusting them were entirely different propositions. 3 months ago, similar voices had assured her that cooperating with the investigation was in everyone's best interest. 3 months ago, she'd believed that serving her country meant following orders without question. Now, watching the ghost aircraft maintain perfect formation in her peripheral vision, she wondered if her administrative leave hadn't been punishment but preparation. Martinez, she said quietly, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, and then I need you to trust me completely. The Boeing 777 continued its westward course through the darkness, carrying 247 passengers who believed they were flying from Seoul to San Francisco, unaware that their aircraft had become a piece in a game being played at altitudes where the sky belonged to no nation, and the rules changed without notice. Martinez nodded, his knuckles white against the control yoke. Outside, the Spectre aircraft adjusted their formation, moving closer with the predatory grace of apex hunters closing on prey. Vera watched them through the cockpit windows, remembering nights when she'd flown similar patterns, when the darkness below held secrets worth dying for, and the silence of radio channels meant missions accomplished without acknowledgement or reward. First, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 12 years flying in shadows, you're going to tell me exactly when our flight plan was filed and who had access to our routing information. Second, you're going to explain why a commercial flight from Seoul to San Francisco is carrying manifest cargo that weighs 3,000 pounds more than the passenger baggage accounts for. And third, you're going to help me figure out why whoever's flying those aircraft believes this airplane poses enough of a threat to justify an intercept in international airspace. The radio static intensified, and through it came the sound that had haunted her dreams for 3 months, the distinctive whine of active targeting systems acquiring lock-on signatures. The Spectre aircraft weren't there to escort them home. They were there to ensure United 847 never reached its destination. Martinez stared at the instrument panel, his commercial pilot's training warring with the reality unfolding around him. Vera, I don't understand any of this. We're just running a routine passenger service. No, she said, studying the radar returns with the analytical precision that had kept her alive through missions in airspace where mistakes were measured in body bags rather than reprimands. We stopped being routine the moment those aircraft appeared on our scope. Now we're something else entirely, and we have about 12 minutes to figure out what that something is before it gets all of us killed. The Pacific Ocean stretched beneath them like black glass, reflecting starlight that seemed too distant and cold. Vera reached for the radio handset, her fingers remembering the weight and texture of equipment that connected pilots to a world of secrets and necessity. She was no longer the administrative leave officer drowsing in row 13, no longer the investigated pilot whose loyalty had been questioned in rooms filled with people who'd never felt the responsibility of keeping aircraft aloft in hostile skies. She was Nighthawk again, and the darkness welcomed her home. Spectre lead, she transmitted, her voice carrying the flat authority that marked her as military despite the commercial cockpit. This is Nighthawk. Identify your mission parameters and explain your intercept authority over civilian traffic in international airspace. The silence that followed stretched long enough for her to count heartbeats. Then, cutting through the static like a blade through silk, Nighthawk, this is Spectre lead. Mission classification remains need to know. You are not cleared for operational details. Maintain assigned heading and prepare for boarding inspection. Vera felt ice crystallize in her veins. Boarding inspection in international airspace meant black site operations, meant passengers and crew who disappeared into administrative categories that existed only in files marked with classifications above top secret. She'd seen the aftermath of such inspections twice, both times as part of cleanup operations that left no witnesses and no questions. "Martinez," she said quietly, "how many souls on board?" 247 passengers, crew of 12. 259 people whose lives had just become variables in an equation she didn't yet understand. The woman in row 13 had been traveling to testify before Congress about operational overreach and unauthorized missions. But the pilot now sitting in the co-pilot's seat was beginning to suspect that her testimony might have been exactly what someone had hoped to prevent. "Spectre lead, this is United 847, she transmitted. "We are a civilian aircraft in international airspace carrying no classified personnel or materials. State your legal authority for intercept and inspection." "Nighthawk." The voice carried a note of something that might have been respect or might have been warning. "You know better than to ask questions you don't want answered. Maintain heading. Comply with instructions. Make this easy for everyone involved." Through the cockpit windows, she could see the nearest Spectre aircraft clearly now, its angular stealth profile cutting through the night like a manifestation of governmental will made tangible. The pilot was close enough that she could make out the faint glow of cockpit instruments, close enough to see the missile pylons that carried ordnance designed for surgical removal of problems that couldn't be solved through conventional diplomatic channels. She'd flown aircraft like that. She'd been the problem solver who appeared in hostile skis without warning or explanation, who completed missions that would never appear in official reports. Now, she was on the receiving end of that same lethal efficiency, and the irony wasn't lost on her. "Martinez, I need access to the cargo manifest. All of it, including any sealed government containers or diplomatic pouches." His hands moved across the panel, calling up screens of data that painted a picture of routine commercial transport. But Vera had learned to read between the lines of official documentation, had spent 12 years navigating the spaces where what appeared on paper diverged from what actually existed. The weight discrepancy she'd noticed was only the beginning. "There," Martinez pointed to a line item buried in the middle of the manifest. "Sealed diplomatic container, State Department routing code. 4,200 pounds, loaded in Seoul under government security protocols." Vera felt the pieces clicking together with the precision of well-maintained machinery. 3 months ago, she'd been placed on administrative leave after questioning orders to transport similar sealed containers from locations that didn't exist on State Department routing lists. 3 months ago, she'd been told that some questions were above her clearance level and beyond her need to know. Spectre aircraft maintained their formation, patient as death, waiting for her decision. Below them, the Pacific Ocean held secrets that would never surface, aircraft and personnel who'd vanished into the spaces between official existence and administrative convenience. She could comply, allow the boarding inspection, trust that whatever was in that diplomatic container was worth the lives of everyone on board. Or she could remember why they'd called her Nighthawk, why her missions had succeeded when others failed. "Martinez," she said, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who'd made similar decisions in skis over Afghanistan and Syria. "I need you to put this aircraft into a steep descent, maintain radio silence, and trust me to keep us alive." The commercial pilot stared at her as if she'd suggested crashing into the ocean. "Vera, those are military aircraft. They have missiles. You want me to run from the United States Air Force?" She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much of what happened when good people followed orders without question, when the machinery of national security consumed individuals in the name of larger purposes that were never quite explained to those who paid the price. "Martinez," she said quietly, "those aircraft don't belong to the United States Air Force, and that container in our cargo hold isn't carrying State Department materials. We're not running from our government. We're running from people who have decided that government oversight is optional and civilian casualties are acceptable losses." The radio crackled with increasing urgency. United 847, you are ordered to maintain current altitude and heading. Any deviation will be considered a hostile act. Acknowledge immediately. Vera reached for the control yoke, feeling the familiar weight of an aircraft responding to her touch. Martinez hesitated for a moment, then placed his hands alongside hers. Commercial training, giving way to the older, deeper instinct of trusting the pilot with the most experience keeping people alive in impossible situations. On my mark, she said. Steep descent, maintain structural integrity, kill all external lights. We're going to disappear. The Spectre aircraft hung in the darkness like mechanical angels of death, beautiful and terrible in their precision. But Vera had spent 12 years learning how such angels could be outmaneuvered by pilots who understood that survival sometimes required abandoning the rules that kept everyone else safe. Mark. The Boeing 777 dropped like a stone into the darkness below, its engines screaming as Vera pushed the civilian aircraft beyond its design parameters, chasing the thin edge between controlled descent and catastrophic failure. Around them, the night sky exploded into controlled chaos as the Spectre aircraft responded to her maneuver, their formation breaking as they adapted to prey that refused to behave like prey. Martinez fought the instinct to pull up, trusting her judgment as altimeter readings spun downward through 20,000 feet, 15,000, 10,000. The cabin behind them erupted in screams as passengers experienced zero gravity, as their routine flight to San Francisco became something no commercial aviation manual had ever contemplated. Vera, we can't maintain this descent rate much longer without structural damage. Another 30 seconds, she said, watching the radar screen as the Spectre aircraft struggled to match their diving profile. Military fighters were designed for intercept and destroy missions, not for following civilian aircraft through aggressive defensive maneuvers. The Boeing's larger mass and different aerodynamics gave her advantages she intended to exploit fully. The ocean surface rushed toward them through the darkness, invisible but increasingly present as radar altitude warnings began chiming. At 5,000 feet, she began the pullout, feeling the aircraft groan under G-forces that threatened to tear rivets from wings and soles from bodies. Martinez gripped his seat as the horizon reappeared through the windscreen, stars wheeling overhead as they leveled off barely 1,000 feet above the Pacific swells. Jesus Christ, Vera, where did you learn to fly like that? Places that don't exist, she said, scanning the radar for pursuit aircraft. In skis where the only rule is staying alive long enough to complete the mission. The Spectre aircraft had scattered during their descent, their sophisticated electronics momentarily confused by the Boeing's aggressive maneuvering. But they were regrouping now, vectoring in from multiple directions with the systematic efficiency of predators who'd been temporarily outmaneuvered, but not defeated. Nighthawk, the radio crackled, impressive flying, but you're only delaying the inevitable. That container in your cargo hold contains materials vital to national security. Land immediately at the designated coordinates, or we will be forced to take more direct action. Vera keyed the microphone, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Spectre lead, this is Nighthawk. I've spent 12 years taking direct action in the name of national security. I've transported your sealed containers and eliminated your designated targets and cleaned up your administrative messes. But I draw the line at 259 civilian passengers becoming collateral damage for whatever's in that diplomatic pouch. The silence stretched long enough for her to wonder if she'd finally pushed too far challenged authority that existed beyond the reach of congressional oversight or public accountability. Then, cutting through the static with the precision of a surgical blade. Nighthawk, you don't understand the full scope of this operation. The materials in that container are time-sensitive. Lives depend on successful delivery. Whose lives? She shot back. Because the only lives I can see right now are the 259 souls on this aircraft who trusted their government not to turn their commercial flight into a black operations asset. Martinez stared at her as the implications sank in. Around them, the Spectre aircraft tightened their formation, no longer content to maintain escort distance. Through the cockpit windows, She could see missile seekers tracking their movement. Death held in abeyance only by whatever political calculations were being made in rooms she'd never seen by people whose names appeared on no organizational charts. Martinez, I need you to contact San Francisco Approach Control on the emergency frequency. Tell them we have a security situation and need immediate military escort from legitimate U.S. Air Force assets. He reached for the radio controls, then hesitated. Vera, what if you're wrong? What if those really are our people and we're about to create an international incident? She looked at him with eyes that had seen too many international incidents, had participated in operations that redefined the boundaries of acceptable collateral damage in the name of objectives that were never quite explained to the people who risked their lives achieving them. Martinez, 3 months ago I was placed on administrative leave for asking similar questions. 3 months ago, I was told that some missions required absolute trust in the chain of command. But the chain of command doesn't intercept civilian aircraft in international airspace unless something has gone very wrong with the system we're supposed to be serving. The radio crackled with increasing tension. United 847, this is your final warning. Comply immediately or face the consequences of your actions. Vera felt the familiar chill that came with crossing points of no return, the moment when training and instinct took over from policy and procedure. She'd felt it over Kandahar when her wingman had been shot down by friendly fire that wasn't supposed to exist. She'd felt it over Syria when orders came to eliminate a target that turned out to be a refugee convoy. She'd felt it in congressional hearing rooms when questions about operational oversight were deflected with claims of national security classification. Martinez, make the call. Emergency frequency. Request immediate assistance from legitimate U.S. military assets. He keyed the microphone with hands that shook only slightly. San Francisco Approach. San Francisco Approach. This is United 847 declaring emergency. We are a civilian aircraft being intercepted by unidentified military assets in international airspace. Request immediate assistance and military escort by verified U.S. Air Force personnel. The response came with startling speed. United 847, this is San Francisco Approach Control. We show no U.S. military assets in your vicinity. Maintain current heading and altitude. Help is en route. Vera felt something cold settle in her stomach. If legitimate U.S. forces weren't tracking the Spectre aircraft, then the intercept was either so classified that normal military channels weren't aware of it, or it involved assets that operated outside traditional command structures entirely. Neither possibility offered comfort. Nighthawk, the Spectre lead's voice carried a note of finality that she recognized from briefings that ended with phrases like acceptable losses and plausible deniability. You've forced our hand. Consider the consequences of your actions for the passengers under your protection. Through the cockpit window, she could see the nearest aircraft adjusting its position, missile seekers tracking their movement with the patient precision of systems designed to eliminate problems that couldn't be solved through negotiation or compromise. The Boeing 777 continued westward through the darkness, carrying its cargo of souls toward a destination that might no longer exist by the time they arrived. Vera reached for the intercom, her finger hovering over the switch that would connect her voice to the passenger cabin. 247 people back there believed they were on a routine flight to San Francisco, trusted that the professionals in the cockpit would deliver them safely to their planned destinations. She'd spent 12 years in military service learning that such trust was both precious and fragile, easily shattered by the realities of operations that existed in the spaces between official policy and necessary action. Martinez, she said quietly, I'm going to speak to the passengers. They deserve to know what's happening to them. He nodded, understanding that the time for comfortable deceptions had passed. Around them, the night sky had become a theater of war where the boundaries between civilian and military, legal and necessary, right and expedient, blurred into ambiguity that offered no clear answers. She keyed the intercom, her voice carrying the calm authority that had guided aircraft through hostile skies and impossible missions. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Castellanos speaking from the flight deck. We are currently dealing with a security situation that requires your cooperation and understanding. Please remain calm, keep your seatbelts fastened, and follow all instructions from the cabin crew. We are working to resolve this situation and return to normal flight operations as quickly as possible." The words felt inadequate for the reality unfolding around them, but they were honest in ways that mattered. In the passenger cabin, people would be looking through windows at aircraft that weren't supposed to exist, would be wondering why their routine flight had become something that required military intervention and emergency protocols. "Spectre Lead," she transmitted, "you have 60 seconds to explain your legal authority for this intercept and identify the contents of the container you're so concerned about. After that, I start broadcasting our position and situation on all international emergency frequencies." The response came with the weight of institutional authority that existed beyond the reach of congressional oversight or judicial review. "Nighthawk, some secrets are worth protecting regardless of the cost. You of all people should understand that principle." She did understand it. She'd lived by it for 12 years, had completed missions that left her questioning the line between serving her country and serving the people who claimed to speak for her country. But understanding a principle and accepting its application to civilian passengers were different propositions entirely. 30 seconds, she said. Spectre aircraft maintained their formation, death held in abeyance by calculations being made in rooms where the value of individual lives was weighed against larger strategic objectives that were never quite explained to the people who paid the price for their implementation. Martinez watched the radar screen with the fascination of someone witnessing history unfold in real time, the moment when the machinery of national security revealed its willingness to consume the very people it claimed to protect. "Time's up," Vera said, and keyed the international emergency frequency. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is United Airlines Flight 847, Boeing 777, currently at position." She read off their coordinates with the precision of someone who'd spent years navigating hostile airspace. "We are being intercepted by unidentified military aircraft in international waters. Request immediate assistance from any vessels or aircraft in the area." The radio exploded with responses from commercial aircraft, naval vessels, and air traffic control centers across the Pacific. Within minutes, their situation had become public knowledge, broadcast across frequencies monitored by news organizations, foreign governments, and oversight agencies that operated independently of whatever authority the Spectre aircraft represented. "Nighthawk," Spectre Lead's voice carried a note of something that might have been respect or might have been regret. "You've just created a situation that will require significant cleanup. I hope you're prepared for the consequences." "I've been prepared for consequences since the day I first put on a uniform," she replied. "The question is whether you're prepared to murder 259 civilians to protect whatever secret you think is worth killing for." The night sky around them had become a theater of competing authorities, civilian and military, legal and extra-legal, accountable and deniable. The Boeing 777 flew westward through the darkness, carrying its cargo of souls toward a destination that had become secondary to the larger question of who possessed the authority to decide which lives were worth preserving and which could be sacrificed for objectives that existed beyond public scrutiny. Martinez monitored the radio chatter, listening to voices from around the Pacific offering assistance and demanding explanations. "Vera, CNN is reporting our situation. BBC World Service is requesting comment from the Pentagon. This is going international fast." She nodded, understanding that publicity was both their protection and their danger. The Spectre aircraft couldn't simply eliminate them now without creating questions that would reverberate through congressional hearings and international diplomatic channels. But they also couldn't allow the container and the cargo hold to reach its destination if it contained materials that justified this level of intervention. "Spectre Lead," she transmitted, "you have a choice to make. Either explain what's in that container and justify your actions to the international community that's now watching, or break off and allow us to continue to our destination. Those are the only options that don't end with congressional investigations and international incidents. The silence stretched long enough for her to count heartbeats, to watch stars wheel overhead through the cockpit windows, to feel the weight of decisions that would echo through the remainder of her life regardless of how this situation resolved. Then, cutting through the static with the finality of institutional authority accepting defeat. Nighthawk, this isn't over. The container will be inspected upon arrival in San Francisco, and your administrative leave just became permanent retirement. The Spectre aircraft broke formation, fatting into the darkness with the systematic precision of assets that had never officially existed. Within minutes, their radar screens showed only commercial traffic and the reassuring transponder codes of legitimate military aircraft vectoring in to provide escort for the remainder of their flight. Martinez slumped in his seat, adrenaline finally giving way to exhaustion. Jesus Christ, Vera, what just happened up here? She looked through the cockpit windows at stars that seemed closer and brighter than they had an hour earlier, at the vast expanse of ocean that held secrets she would never fully understand. The woman who had been drowsing in row 13 was gone, replaced by someone who understood that serving one's country sometimes required challenging the people who claimed to speak for it. "We just learned," she said quietly, "that some questions are dangerous enough to kill for, and some secrets are worth protecting even from the people who are supposed to be keeping them." The Boeing 777 continued westward through the night, carrying its passengers toward San Francisco and toward answers that would reshape everything they thought they knew about the space between civilian life and military necessity, between serving one's country and serving the institutions that claimed authority over it. In the cargo hold below them, a sealed container held materials that someone considered worth the lives of 259 civilians. By morning, that container would be opened by people whose authority derived from congressional oversight rather than administrative convenience. By morning, the night's events would become part of a larger conversation about accountability and oversight, about the line between necessary secrecy and convenient deniability. But for now, they flew westward through the darkness, guided by stars and principles that existed above the reach of institutional authority, carrying their cargo of souls toward a destination that had become more than geographical, had become moral and philosophical and ultimately human in ways that transcended the machinery of national security and governmental necessity. Captain Vera Nighthawk, Castellanos settled back in the co-pilot's seat, watching the instruments that measured their progress through the night sky, understanding that some flights ended not with arrival at planned destinations, but with the recognition that the journey itself had been the destination all along. The administrative leave that had brought her to row 13 seemed like ancient history now, replaced by questions that would shape the remainder of her life and the lives of everyone who had shared this night above the Pacific. The radio chattered with voices offering assistance and demanding explanations, with the sound of democracy and oversight and accountability asserting themselves against the machinery of convenient secrecy. And for the first time in 3 months, Vera felt like she was flying toward something worth reaching rather than away from something she could no longer bear to serve.